The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
What was that again, Daniel?
I was just going to share, Stephen, I was thinking about you this morning. So I'm an avid Peloton rider. And the very first song that was on the playlist of my ride this morning was Tina Turner's What's Love Got to Do With It? And thinking about preparation for this conversation, thinking about how do we bring more love, more compassion into the world of work, I thought it was a perfect song to kickstart the day.
Nice.
Yeah, I feel like music too, it just follows me around like that too, where it's just like, sometimes I just totally put my my phone when I'm playing music on just random music because it's always this narrative of something going on in my life that's gives me time to reflect on. Anyway, welcome everyone. I'm Steven Zakash, joined by Mike Lewski, Tulio Saragusa, and our special guest. Hey, today is our 100th episode. So I just want to take a moment to first thank our co-hosts, Mike, Tulio, and Ash, who isn't here. And behind the scenes, Martha, we're going to get you on the show sometime, Martha, and Michelle, Gabe, and all those here on the team here at the Bliss Business Podcast, as well as all of our guests, and especially our listeners. The light is much brighter when many people carry the torch versus a single person, but a single person can make a massive difference. And how? Well, I always say we just can't settle for random acts of kindness. We need systemized acts of kindness, systems of love that work day and night, not random acts that happen because of the personality of one great individual who, when they're gone, that love goes with them. We need to turn that into permanent changes in the machinery and the systems around you. We need people who build love into the system so that when they're no longer there, their impact will be continually felt. People who want to leave a real mark or a legacy. And I know people often feel a little helpless to make change, but there are things around you right now where you can make an impact, and they can be little things. As the saying goes, I've said it before through these 100 episodes, little by little, a little makes a lot. So if you're at work, start asking questions on how you can build love into some part of your business systems. We've explored that in many, many ways here for the 100 shows. So if you're looking for ideas, we've got a lot of them. So that said,
Steven, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a little surprise today for our 100th show.
Uh-oh.
Someone's going to make a cameo and say hi. The one who works in the background to get all our guests on the show. Here she is.
Hey, there's Martha. Martha, say hi.
Martha, there you go. With the ice has been broken.
This feels like an ambush.
It kind of is, but we're trying to get the audience to comment and say, bring Martha back so we can hold on.
But I think the occasion is a great one to say congratulations on 100 shows. And it's been an honor and a pleasure to be putting out to the world all this love, conversation, and empathy and compassion that do belong in the workplace. So I'm just so happy and honored to be part of the show.
Awesome. And
that wasn't so hard, Martha.
Now we're just going to go in the background and let Martha take over the conversation.
All right, Martha, your show is here. We all leave.
All right, we did it.
No, that's our April Fool's. We'll just all leave live. And so anyway, so much of what we talked about here has been really about balancing that drive for business and profit with a wider perspective. So one that considers people and the planet as well. So for our 100th show today, we are talking about balancing profit and social responsibility. Mike, please introduce our guest today.
I will definitely. Steve, but you might notice something new about me today.
What's going on, Mike?
Show.
My
uniform has changed.
Oh, I thought it was the glasses. Yeah, it's black on black.
I'm rocking some new threads.
What happened to the brown jacket?
For the new show? Yeah, no, these guys love to make fun of me of my jacket that I wear, so I figured I'd change it up for the 100th show. So
nice.
But
hey,
yes,
Mike, if no one's noticed, this is like I've worn this 100 episodes. This is like after the show, it goes off and goes on. This is so. This is like that's like the Steve Jobs closet, right? Where we've just got the
It just hangs on the mic. It's part of the show.
Yeah, it just goes up back on the hanger and I'm done. So keep it consistent. I want to change something for the next 100. I'm not sure what it'll be yet. Just so I can tell the difference. Sorry for interrupting. We've got to get to the show here.
Keep us guessing. But yes, Stephen, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Daniel Horgan. He is the CEO of CoLabL, which is a company specializing in building purpose-driven partnerships that create lasting impact, which we know is perfect for our listeners and this show. Daniel, with decades of experience, has worked with Fortune 500 companies, nonprofits, and educational institutions to bridge the gap between profit and purpose, which we know is so critical in our world today. He's a passionate advocate for equity, inclusion, and mentorship, helping organizations really align their goals with their social responsibilities. Daniel's expertise has empowered countless leaders to think their approach and rethink it so that it's more collaborative and innovative. Daniel, welcome to our show. Let's start real quick by just learning a little bit about your journey. What inspired you to, first off, maybe dedicate your career to connecting profit with purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me and congratulations on the 100th episode. It's awesome. I'm very grateful for the opportunity. I think, honestly, when you think about what inspired me to go on the journey that I've been on, it really goes back to when I was 11 years old. I'm the youngest of three. I have two older brothers. There was a summer when I was 11 where both of them were off as camp counselors at a YMCA in Pittsburgh, where I'm from originally, where I grew up. And I remember the first couple of days of them going off to work and me being at home by myself and being like, wow, this really sucks. Like, I don't really like this. And I wanted to do what they wanted to do, right? And so I convinced my oldest brother, Tom, to let me come to the camp and convince the camp director not to be a participant in the camp. Keep in mind that this camp went from 6-year-olds all the way up to 12-year-olds. I was 11. But I wanted to volunteer. I wanted to be there and support some of the younger kids. So long story short, I worked with the 6-year-olds that summer. The following summer, I got invited back as a volunteer. And it really changed the course of, I think, my perspective on empathy and on love. I had the opportunity that summer to work with a little boy named Patrick. Patrick had Down syndrome. And what I noticed really quickly with Patrick was the world around him, the people around him often limited what he could engage in. But what I saw in his facial expressions and the way he showed up in the world, including like every day when he would run over to me, when he saw me, when he got to camp and give me a big hug, because he was excited about the opportunity that camp was going to present to him. And Patrick, I saw something in him that he could do more than the people around him were maybe limiting him from doing. So when people said he couldn't play kickball, we got him in the kickball game, right? When people said he couldn't engage in the arts and craft activity, we got him involved in it, or do any sort of activity that somebody else said no to. I would always go to him and say, do you want to do this? And I think that story, was sort of the bedrock for everything I've done since, right? Taking a step back and saying, what are the limiting beliefs that we have on ourselves that are holding us back from doing what we know is maybe right, or what we feel driven to do in terms of purpose, or looking around us and saying, who can I support in my space that maybe is standing in their own way or allowing other people's voices to hold them back? So long story short, that's kind of the catalyst. I ran nonprofit organizations for many, many years. I started a nonprofit when I was 18 as a college freshman, again, with the spirit of compassion and bringing people together. It was all about making sure young people had a seat at the table, particularly in situations where policies or programs were impacting them. So it was school-based programs, but it was also Mayor's Youth Advisory Council, so making sure that young people were a part of shaping policy in the Pittsburgh area. Went on from there, a mentor of mine was running the Capital One Foundation and invited me to come join her team to create the first community affairs strategy for Capital One on a national basis. So I learned at that point, again, balancing national to local work, supporting our 1,000+ branches across the country. That included everything from our grant making strategy to our employee engagement to how we led with, these are the assets that we as a company have, and how do we put these assets into play to really address and strengthen community issues. So started CoLabL 10 years ago. We're celebrating 10 years in 2025. And our work is really about building bridges between where you are individually and where you want to go, your own definition of success, but also building bridges between employers and community-based organizations that are doing this work every day to prepare young people for work.
Right on.
Yeah, I want to step back a little and think about the bigger picture of it. Kind of, this probably corresponds with your journey, but for the past few decades, just why do you think it's becoming more important for businesses to prioritize some sort of social responsibility or higher purpose?
It's an interesting question, Stephen. I think that at the end of the day, when I think about it, I zoom out. I don't think it's changed. I think it's just been given a bigger spotlight. I think that business leaders and businesses of all different sizes and different industries, I think there's always people in history that you can point to and say they went to work and they were doing more than just generating profit. They were trying to change the game for their community, for the employees that worked for them, for their customers. I think more recently, we've put a bigger spotlight. We've put more language around what we're talking about when you balance profit and social responsibility. I think that because of that increased spotlight, there's a higher sense of accountability that people are being asked to communicate. Like, are you making progress in these particular targets or not? And if not, what are you doing to course correct? But I think, again, it's always been there. I think our voices are getting a little bit louder. We're starting to see more people change, where they make decisions about where they're going to work, but also what businesses they're going to support as a customer too, based on, how that company, how those leaders are connecting back to community and social impact.
So really it's kind of maturing in a way from where it started to becoming more, like you said, formalized, understanding accountability. And I wonder, do you think like the younger generations too are coming online with desire for more, meaning, more, social action within their work?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's they're more vocal. I think it's always been there. I think people of all generations, even today, they still want quality jobs. They still want access to opportunities. They still want to go to work and feel like they're adding value to whatever it is they're contributing. And they still want respect from not just their managers and leaders, but also from the people they collaborate with. I think younger generations today are much more vocal about it and use it as a stronger filter when making decisions about where they're going to work. An example tactically would be in the past. I think past generations, my father worked in the same organization for 30 plus years. And you saw how that company treated their employees over time, decade after decade. I think younger generations say, look, I'm going to go and I'm going to work in an organization. If 6 to 12 months from now, I'm not getting that respect, people aren't investing in me and helping me to grow, challenging me in all new spaces, holding me accountable for the job that I have, then I'm going to move to someplace else where I can keep growing and keep learning along the journey.
I think you said something really interesting. The older generation was more about what was expected of them or of us. I consider myself part of that generation a little bit. And then the newer one, it's more about having expectations. So I'd be curious in the topic of employee expectations and the desire for more autonomy. I'd love to explore how businesses are empowering their workforce through, for example, self-management principles. That's become more of a topic in recent years. Even McKinsey's done studies on this, publicized and content around this. Have you seen, or are you seeing companies experimenting with more decentralized decision-making or equivalence-based cultures where it's less hierarchical? And if so, what kind of impact is that having on employee engagement and even on innovation?
I think, it's a great question. I think that when companies are clear on roles and responsibilities and specifically where decision-making lies, it frees people up to be creative in how they do the work. So there's clarity from the get-go on sort of what the goal is and what the measure of success is that we're targeting. But how to get there, we acknowledge that there's maybe 3 or 4 plus different ways. And you're getting the employees excited about choosing the path based on their past experiences, their skill sets and strengths, which path that they're going to choose to go forward. When you have that clarity around the North Star and the measures of success from the get-go, I think you do have more autonomy and you have people feeling more engaged, more empowered. When you have a lack of clarity or consistency in what the measures of success are, then you, I think, channel a lot more frustration among your employees because they're never quite sure, are they making progress? Are they contributing in a meaningful way? And the last thing I would just say is I think that the feedback is kind of wrapped around it all. Like if you have a culture of feedback, a culture that is not just waiting for an annual performance review, but consistently building in feedback and coaching for everybody, up, down, and across the organization, again, you move forward faster and you move forward with the spirit of always learning, always evolving.
I think when we talk about like that self-management and empowering people to, this is where that diversity comes in, that diversity of thought, that diversity of, background and everything, to where now you're driving that innovation and you're getting more voices heard. And it becomes, I've seen this at our work as we've just switched over to this self-managed thing where I'm just kind of sit back a little bit and see people kind of come into their own a little bit. And it's really fulfilling for me personally, but also it's just kind of fascinating to watch people who were like, okay, you had mentioned being limiting earlier in the show. It's like, okay, were we limiting them by not giving them, the opportunity just to jump into a new role, right? We should do this whole topic just on limiting at some point, just because that's probably a good show in general. But I don't think I've got a question here, but
I think to build on your point though, Stephen, and on Daniel's point, where's the decision, lie? And then do they have the information or the insights, the metrics, in order to be able to, then make a good assessment. So I think it's a super good point. But Dale, so I want to build a little bit on Tulio's comment, right? So we talked about in the intro, sort of your focus on, really trying to form partnerships that would create a lasting impact. And so I was curious if maybe you might share with our audience an example or two about, that type of collaboration where you saw, okay, this is actually a really good balance between profit and social responsibility, or profit and purpose. And then maybe what are some even the lessons that came out of those examples?
Yeah, totally. I can think of two offhand. One that I think is a great example of cross-company collaboration, which is very rare in my opinion when it's done well. So the quick example would be a partnership that I helped facilitate between LinkedIn, Starbucks, and Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership, which is a national nonprofit. Wow. And the example goes like this, right? So LinkedIn has this massive network of millions of professionals across all different industries, all different levels of experience. Many of those professionals that are part of LinkedIn's community want to give back in a meaningful way, whether that's through formal or informal mentorship, sharing career advice, volunteering their time. And they express that through their profiles, through their engagement on the platform. Starbucks wants to drive people as customers to their stores, right? To engage in their restaurant and their third place, as they talk about. And lastly, Mentor wants people to have meaningful conversations that push past the surface to understand, where somebody is on their journey and how we can help get them to whatever the next step is that they've defined, again, as part of their definition of success. So what we did is we facilitated 10,000 plus connections across the country by inviting professionals in targeted cities all across the US to raise their hand and say, hey, as a LinkedIn professional, I want to meet a young person in my community and offer my career experiences, my stories, but also share insights to help them get to where they want to go. Mm-hmm. Starbucks hosted all of these experiences, provided the food, the beverage, the space, and then Mentor facilitated it. And to me, it's such a great example because, again, there's profit in all of that, right? And there's social responsibility in saying, how are we staying in touch with the front line of our work? LinkedIn staying in touch with its frontline, professionals that are members. Starbucks staying in touch with its customers and its community, which is a big part of how it runs its business. And Mentor staying in touch with the people that we know we need to move more mentorship in this in the country, right? I'll give you another example more recently. So I do a lot of a lot of work with the Taco Bell Foundation. And so every year we host something called the Summer of Connection. They have a network of over 3,900 Live Más scholars, which are young people ages 16 to 26 that are receiving anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000 to support their education in pursuit of their passion to make a difference in the world, using their skills, their experiences. And the Summer of Connection conference, this past summer, we hosted at the Lowe's Hotel in Coronado in San Diego. And as someone who helps to design and shape the experience, scholars, to get their scholarship, they have to give a 2-minute passion pitch video. It's not about their academics. It's not about extracurriculars. It's a 2-minute passion pitch video to say who you are, what you're passionate about, and what difference you want to make in the world. And what we wanted to do is challenge the scholars who were coming to this conference to say, we're going to walk into this hotel. We're going to be greeted by people that are at the front door, at the reception desk, food and beverage throughout the whole conference experience. We're going to see housekeeping every day. How do we remind ourselves that every single person you encounter has a story to tell? So what we did is we partnered with Lowe's as a company, and we said, we want to invite your employees, open this to all levels, from the CEO, general manager, all the way down to entry-level positions within the company, to raise their hand and say, you're passionate about something outside of work, something that you do to make a difference in your community or something that's impacted you personally. So we went through a selection process, selected 5 employees from Lowe's, and we coached them. We provided workshops and training to help them think about how they would tell their story. And we invited them on the main stage in front of all the conference participants, plus all their teams. The general manager brought the entire executive team to the event. And those 5 professionals, they stood up and said, this is who I am. This is what I'm passionate about outside of my role here at this organization. I mean, there were tears amongst the scholars, but there were tears amongst a lot of the people that work side by side these professionals as well every day.
Wow.
And the general manager said to me, that was single-handedly one of the most impactful experiences that she had in her entire career working in hospitality. And the reason I share that story is because profit and social responsibility relies first, I think, in saying, let's acknowledge that we're all human. We take on job titles and roles, but we're human. And we have all sorts of other things that make us who we are, all sorts of roles that we play. When we acknowledge that and celebrate it and give people a platform to talk about it, to honor their stories, they feel more engaged, they feel more excited, more innovative. And at the end of the day, you can produce a lot more results in terms of the work that you do together.
You know what I like about that? I mean, because we talk about companies trying to find their soul, right? A lot of times. And, you know, you've got like sort of the marketing campaign, Live Moss. Okay, what does that mean? What does that really mean? And then you equate that into this passion project, really, you know, and people bringing out their passion. So then you find the connection there with that, and it stays on point with their overall marketing theme, but it really brings the soul alive in those companies that do that. And that's really just a huge difference from, say, checking off the box of, yeah, we're doing this because we should do it, right? Yeah. To actually, no, this is what we're about.
Yeah. And Stephen, just to build on that, you know, at the end of the day, if you go through a drive-through, you go to a movie theater, you go to a store, you are in transactions with people until you're curious enough to ask the questions to build a connection with that person. They do something as an organization to elevate what that person stands for or what they're passionate about outside of work. And it's those conversations that make your relationship with a barista or a store clerk that much more meaningful and make you want to come back and continue to support and engage in those spaces. And to me, that's great business practice because that's the front line of your business. So when you're investing in that space, that is your social responsibility. You're taking care of your people first and foremost. You're honoring who they are and encouraging them to be ambassadors for what you stand for, your values as a company.
I think you said something really on point on this because many think about social responsibility as just an outward thing a company's doing, but it really starts with the employees. And I always go back to this idea of empowerment and engaging stakeholders. You mentioned this idea of engaging stakeholders. And what I like a lot about self-management system or autonomous system is that the principles create a lot of alignment in actually giving the individuals the power to make an impact. And that is helping people. That is part of being socially responsible, is giving people the opportunity to make an impact because it's a strongly innate desire in all of us. How do you think leaders can use some of these principles to empower employees to take ownership, for example, to be more purpose-driven and while maintaining alignment in the overall business objective? I think you touched on this a little bit. I'm curious to see if you've got some examples of where that's come to life.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, from a very tactical strategy standpoint, and I believe this has been something I've practiced my whole career, you've got to co-create with people. And when you don't co-create, it feels very top-down, very directive, versus co-creating, which is I'm honoring the fact that you bring different lived experiences and perspectives, skills and networks to the table. And I don't know what those are, unless I'm curious enough to ask the questions and be intentional with the time we spend together to uncover those things. And when I use those in a meaningful way, when we co-create strategy, products, services, the way we engage with customers, we can get to a much better outcome. And then translate that same practice to how you engage with customers. So I would say, I work with a woman named Christine, who leads people culture for McDonald's across the US, North America. Perfect example. Christine always has this great saying. She's like, the answers are in the team already. If you're facing a challenge or an obstacle and you're trying to navigate a current situation, look to the team for the answers, right? So really thinking about how are we going straight to our restaurants and talking to the employees that are on the front line. And a lot of times people will be like, oh, they're like a 16 to 18-year-old. This is their first job. Like, what do they have to teach us? Well, they're interacting with your customers day in and day out. So they have a lot to teach you. And they have a lot of perspective that can help shape and form that strategy, help you be more innovative, attract new people to your company. So I think that's an example of co-creating. I think two is being intentional with our use of time. So again, I work with so many young professionals when I'm not shocked anymore, but I was earlier on, people who say like, I haven't talked to my manager in several weeks. I haven't had a one-on-one with them.
Wow.
And it's just like when versus the young professionals who say, I have like every Monday morning a check-in with my manager. First and foremost, how are you doing? Human to human. Second, what's our top priorities for the week? What can I help remove? What barriers are in your way for this week? What are you anticipating, right, that might surface this week? Those are the types of managers that have connected human to human, and they feel like they're really in their court. Versus, a manager who is showing somebody through their actions, I don't have time for you, right? I'm not going to invest in you. And that message, even though it's not verbally shared, is communicated through the actions that a manager or a leader shows.
And so you mentioned co-create, you mentioned being intentional. What are some other practical steps that like leaders can take to align that, that profitability with purpose in the organizations?
Yeah, totally. So another practical tip I always say is at the top of your agendas, have the standing question, whose voice are we missing in the decisions we're making today? Have that on a little tent card in every conference room. If you're in person or virtually, have it on your screen. It's just a reminder, like in the decisions that we're making for our strategy and for the work that we're doing, like, are we missing a valuable point of view that can shape our work, right? So that's one particular practice. I think that accountability and transparency is another practice when it comes to this work of profit and social responsibility. Like, I think sometimes people are hesitant to put a stake in the ground and say, this is what our definition of success looks like in this space, and then transparently communicate, are we making it or not? And when we're not making it, saying, okay, so we fell short, here's what we're going to do to course correct or to change our particular strategy. So I think being really transparent in how we're reporting publicly. One of my favorite stories from that is many, many, many years ago, Zipcar. When Zipcar first launched, the woman who was the CEO of Zipcar, they made a mistake in the way that they had forecasted how they financed and how they sort of were charging customers. And they wrote a letter to customers that said, we made a mistake. We have to change our pricing model. And here's what it's going to be over the course of the next several months. And I want you to know that we're taking full accountability and responsibility for this decision. To me, that transparency builds more trust for me as a customer and makes me want to come back, because I believe that they're not just saying what their values are, but they're living them in the decisions, the actions that they're taking.
Yeah, you can feel that authenticity a little bit more right there. Saying, hey, we're kind of inviting you into our world for a second. This is where we kind of messed up. I love that when companies can really invite people into that process and be a part of it.
Yeah. And then actually just going back down to your point about the project that you did with LinkedIn and Starbucks and mentors, it reminded me of almost like a model, and I call it like the art of the win-win-win. And so it was like the perfect example for me of the win-win-win, right? And even like your example earlier on, I think of your work with Patrick, right? Like you were looking for something, and the camp allowed you to do that. And then, for example, then Patrick got a chance to, work out sort of what he was looking for, right? And so through that, you did another example, I think, of like a win-win-win. And rather than just looking for a win-win, which I think we've thought about so much in business, or and even like our relationships outside of work is like, oh, is this going to be like a win-win? But it's almost looking for that third opportunity for somebody else to win. And I've just seen, some of the more beautiful things in life take shape when we fulfill all three of those things. Yeah. And so that kind of brings me to maybe the next topic around mentorship, and hopefully we can dive pretty deep into this topic here, because I know that's something that you're pretty passionate about, and mentorship, and then actually empowering future leaders. So I'm curious, like how do mentorship programs contribute to social responsibility and increasing that? And for the leaders that are present today, what role does the leader have to play in fostering that kind of a culture?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost, to what you just said with the win-win-win, it's balancing teaching and learning, which is in play in all of those win-win-win examples. When we balance teaching and learning, we admit from the first step that we don't know everything, and that our curiosity will lead us to uncover, the missing context, regardless of where we are in our organization. So around mentorship, what I would say is, the reality is a lot of times people think mentorship and they think very formalized programs. I think it's natural, especially in the US, for people to think mentorship, big brothers, big sisters, right? You're getting matched up. You have a formal experience that you're going through. Most mentorship is actually informal, right? It's you and I in a relationship, meeting for coffee once a month, never calling each other mentor mentee, right? But just connecting on a human to human level, coming with some specific questions in mind and sharing insights. Great mentorship is when you explore options together versus direct. So there's a difference between direct versus coaching, right? If I'm coaching, I'm going to ask you lots of questions. What you come to the table with might not be actually what you're trying to solve for. So I'm feeling stuck in my career. I don't know what's next. The more questions I ask, it might not be that you're feeling stuck. It might just be that you're in the wrong career, right? Like you're doing the wrong thing right now, or you're in the wrong environment. You're in the right career, but wrong environment to be able to get to that next level. So the more questions I ask, the more I can uncover what the real challenge or barrier is. And then we can get to exploring options. I really believe great mentorship, though, is when the person who is seeking the mentorship or seeking the advice is empowered to make the most informed decision for themselves. So again, great intent. A lot of times leaders and managers will come into a mentorship relationship and just want to tell somebody, oh, you want to do that? Follow these steps and you'll get to the next step or next level, right? Versus really getting to know and understand the story that led that person to where they are today or how they're showing up.
Right.
I think reverse mentorship is also something I would mention is something that's key, especially connecting profit and social responsibility. I work with Gap, and Gap has this great program called This Way Onward. They have over 1,000 young people across the country, across North America, that they engage as interns. Before that group of interns ever even start, store leaders, regional leaders are out in partnership with community-based organizations, volunteering their time right alongside prospective candidates for the program. So before you come in for a formal interview, and we're in this sort of power dynamic, we're just getting to know each other. It's Stephen, Tulio, and Mike all like volunteering side by side, like chatting it up, getting to know each other, and then trying to figure out like, where is there maybe a fit, maybe where there's an opportunity that I could help you unlock on your path. And to me, again, that's what the informal mentorship comes into play. I've taken my time, so I'm intentional with how I'm spending my time, building connections with people that might be on my team or might be on someone else's team that I could refer them to based on what their interests are, what their goals are.
Daniel, we got a question from the audience. What advice would you give a small and medium-sized businesses that want to implement social responsibility initiatives but feel limited by their resources? That's probably something that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
What's the advice there?
Yeah, so I would start with a couple of things. One is I think you have to start internally with your own people. So take the time to understand, if you're a small to mid-sized business, what are your employees already caring about and doing outside of work? And giving them a platform, just like the example I shared with Lowe's, where they can share their examples, right? Hey, I volunteer my time with this nonprofit called Reading Legacies. We're always looking for volunteers. If you're passionate about literacy and love to read, hey, check them out or come with me to this volunteer project. Like that's a great way you can start connecting more of your employees back out into the community and celebrate the people that are already on your team. Two is I would turn to your customers and I would start to look at across the board, what do your customers care about? And as you ask those questions, zoom out and look for the trends, right? So you're not going to be able to do everything that every customer wants. That'll just spread you too thin. But think about, what are the trends? What are the categories of interest that you see rising above in terms of all your customer feedback? And then start to identify what already exists in your community, especially with limited resources. Our natural inclination so often is that we want to brand something ourselves. We want to own something. I hear that all the time. Versus honor and celebrate something that's already in motion within your community. And because of the status as a small, medium-sized business, think about how you can leverage your resources, whether that's your people, whether that's your products or services, to support that particular organization. How you can lend the skills and expertise of your team. I've done so many pro bono projects connecting employees of companies with various causes in the community. It requires no financial exchange, but it requires people's skills being offered. Great example is during COVID, the Orange County Community Food Bank, leveraging people's expertise in logistics and operations to help streamline, because the food banks were closed. How do we streamline the distribution of food to people in our community that need it most, right? So it's the skill and expertise exchange versus the financial exchange. And again, it's good for profit. It raises the brand awareness around who you are. It showcases the values of your organization in action. The more that not only you tell the story, but more importantly, the people that you're partnering with are telling the story of what you're doing. And those third-party testimonials, I think, have so much great power.
Thank you for the question, Martha. We're about to wrap up. If you have any questions, please submit it now, and we'll do our best to get to it. Mike?
Yeah, I'm actually really curious, Daniel, about mindsets and maybe the shift that has to take place. So what's the most effective mindset shift that a leader needs to make in order to just go full in on this purpose-driven approach?
I think the first thing, I'll connect it for a second. I think the most important thing is acknowledging that the culture that we create and curate within our organizations is what creates the change that we want to see. And I think so often I hear people of all levels, all the way up to C-suite, say, our culture really sucks right now, or our culture is really challenged right now. And people point fingers and we're all making that culture together, right? So again, it goes back to the accountability. If we acknowledge that the culture we might not like right now or don't feel like is helping us realize our full potential is the culture that we are fostering. So as leaders, and people who are passionate about changing the culture, right? Then think about the actions that you can take day in and day out. And so often people will say oh, I can't influence my leadership to approve that. Then just start with your actions and how you engage people and how you show people that sense of compassion and respect that you yourself want, so that gets modeled and replicated to others. Mm-hmm. Find those few champions, hold them up as leaders within organizations, spotlight them. People pay attention to the people that you're recognizing, right? So that as you're recognizing those specific behaviors, you're also encouraging other people to practice those same sets of behaviors. So I think that's the mindset shift. It's not happening to you, but it's happening with you. And I think you have a responsibility as a leader of any size organization to take an active part in shaping and curating that culture.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think that presents such a amazing contrast to maybe what was highlighted, say 20 years back, right, where it was top performer, right, or in sales, or versus today, somebody who's helping a teammate out, right, and what they're doing in order to lift everybody else up. It has been, I think, a pretty interesting shift in the last couple of decades, and I love your point there about really highlighting those that are embodying the culture that you want to continue to foster. It's a really good point.
And Mike, I would just add really quickly the importance of also going back to that front line. I think it's something that's so simple. It doesn't require any additional resources financially, but it makes huge impacts within an organization. It's balance being on the dance floor, being on the balcony. When you're on the dance floor, you're right there with the front line of your organization, whether it's a call center or with your customers out, your business developers out with customers, seeing how your customers are experiencing your product, and then shifting back to the balcony to say like, okay, with all those observations, what have I learned, and how am I shaping that into the policy, the strategy that we move forward with?
Mm-hmm. It's a cool metaphor.
Yeah, I like, we're talking about that shift real quick. I mean, one of the big shifts I think for leaders is that you really do have to go into that service mindset, right? How can I be in service to the team, to whatever, to our purpose, that kind of thing. You really kind of have to switch that, and then everything starts to flow a lot better from that area versus, because then you get more voices being heard and things like that. So, before we close, is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners about how they can begin their journey toward balancing, profit and social responsibility? We've talked about it a little bit right here, but like, what else would you like to add to that?
I think the only thing I would just add, and I heard this recently, it was a perfect quote that I think is so powerful, which is, your no's give power to your yeses. And I think sometimes as leaders, we want to, and we see this playing out now, we want to sort of please as many people as possible, right? So we're constantly saying yes, yes, yes. But when we get really clear about what it is that we stand for, and we are consistent in the way that we show up, in the way that we intentionally use our time, use our social capital, use the platform that we have as a business, we can create whatever sort of change, whatever sort of impact we want in the community. But that requires us to say no to certain things, no to how we spend our time, no to the investments that we're making or the direction that we're taking with the business, so that whatever we say yes to holds more power and holds more purpose. It's aligned more to the core mission of what we stand for as a business. I think it's the consistency in practice. There's so many organizations, so many leaders that stand up and say they believe in something, and then 6 months later, it's like complete reversal of whatever they stood for. And to me, it's like, that is going to erode the trust that you have, not just with your people on your team, but also with the customers and the people in your own community.
So thank you so much, Daniel. We've heard so many great tips and advice for business leaders, and also the desire for at least the newer generation to have more impact, to have more empowerment. So one of the questions that this begs is, would flattening hierarchies create more equitable environments for decision-making and collaboration? Do you think that's what's needed? What are your final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say my quick final thought on that is, I think, flattening hierarchy sounds maybe exciting, but I think it comes with a whole lot of steps that have to be factored into it. So again, if you flatten hierarchies, but still don't clarify who ultimately is making a decision, you're going to have a lot of people running in lots of different directions. There's going to be lots of ego in play. There's going to be lots of complications, I think. Again, if you clarify the North Star, the measures of success, and you co-created those things from the get-go, you're all moving in the same direction, and you're giving people the autonomy to follow the path that they think is the best path from point A to point B. Flattening the hierarchy, again, I think sometimes results in less direction, less.
Yeah, I'd say don't do it until you know your North Star and everyone knows it and what your purpose is.
And even then, I always find it funny when people think self-management is flat, but it's still hierarchy, but it's more about who's willing to serve others that get voluntarily followed versus the person who's on top because they have a title. So there's a big difference between the two. Yeah. But flat could actually cause chaos. I agree with you. So
yeah. And Tully, the one thing I would just say too, is this goes back to like my early days in my career when I did a lot of youth development, youth leadership work. I still see this playing out with senior leadership teams that I work with. We don't take the time to understand who we are around a table working on a project. We get a project from that North Star vision and we dive in to move it forward, failing to say, what are Stephen, Mike, Tulio, and Dan's top strengths? What are their experiences that contribute the most to this project? And so I think with flattened hierarchies, if you haven't taken the time to really elevate and increase awareness around the people on the team and what they bring to the table, what their core strengths are, then again, you're not fully utilizing the potential of the group. And therefore, you're only going to hit a certain mark of success versus the full potential.
100%.
Yeah, for sure.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, we started this broadcast with a little conversation, so I want to end it with that a little bit. Daniel, in business, what's love got to do with it?
I love it. I'm hearing Tina in my head. I think that, at the end of the day, my perspective is like love is the real heartbeat of a business. And if you think about, like, I was using an analogy as like being on a Peloton or anybody's workout routine, right? When your heart rate speeds up, there's an adrenaline rush, there's an excitement, there's an energy that you bring to the table as a leader. And then sometimes when your heart rate slows down, right, you can get lethargic, you can get tired, you get worn out, you get burnout, right? So paying attention to our heartbeat is super important. And I would say the best advice to leave you with is, like, we have to be intentional with that heartbeat, right? So when we work out, right, we're trying to maintain good health so we can do the things that we want to do in our lives. And as leaders of any size organization, if we're intentional with how we pay attention to, how we spend time on the heartbeat, then again, the products, the services, whatever we're putting out into the world is going to be rooted in that love, that sense of compassion and respect. And that will carry, I would say, twice as much profit. Beyond the money, it's going to carry the relationship profit that you can gain with it.
Nice. Crushed it. I love that. Daniel, where can people learn more about you and what you're doing?
Yeah, definitely. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn, but also check out CoLabL.com to learn more about the work that we're doing.
All right, Daniel, thank you for your time and inspiring us to all think differently about the impact we can have through our work. And thank you to our listeners for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode. Like I said, it can't just be, one person carrying the torch. We all should, pick up a torch. We'll shine much brighter that way. So we'll see you next time on the Bliss Business Podcast.